Thank you very much, Betty. Of course, we have been live all morning at the Serena Hotel, where we've just been covering the Committee to Protect Journalists new report, which has just been launched a few minutes ago. And right now, I'm joined by the Executive Director, Joel Simon, to just give us a brief preview of what exactly is in this report and why they decided to, analyze the journalism environment in Kenya. So just in brief, this report, what is it all about?
This report looks at the broad climate for the exercise of journalism in Kenya right now. And what the report found was there are two fundamental challenges. One, the legal environment has grown more restrictive. There is new legislation and proposed new legislation. Together, this has created a sense that journalists are not legally secure, that they can be hauled into court, that they can be legally harassed, that they could face criminal defamation charges. And the second is the physical security. We've documented about one attack a week in the first 6 months of this year, mostly at the county level, journalists covering regional issues. There have been a series of attacks, some fairly serious, some very serious, and there's been really a lack of investigation, a lack of support for these journalists. So journalists feel legally and physically vulnerable, and that's creating an environment in which the Kenyan people are not fully served by the media because journalists are afraid to report on certain sensitive issues.
So while we are seeing these situations, why do you think that, freedom of press continues to be threatened in Kenya, especially at a time when this shouldn't be the case?
I think that Kenya faces very significant challenges. There's no question about it. There's a security challenge in this country. There's also a development challenge. Kenya is growing, and there's a need to provide jobs and a better future for Kenyans. But what troubles me is certain kinds of government rhetoric in which the notion that the work of the media or a free press somehow inhibits the achievement of these legitimate functions. There's a freedom of expression and freedom of the press, and the work of the press is fundamental to creating a secure environment. The government itself and the public certainly cannot fully engage in the security debate without being fully informed about both the challenges and the performance of the government. Likewise, with development, there are legitimate public debates about development, about who's benefiting, about where those resources are being used, about how effective it is. The public cannot fully engage, and the government itself that is making these policies is not fully informed if the media is not performing and not covering these issues critically. And that's what we need to see.
And therefore, from this, what are some of the recommendations that your team came up with?
Well, I think that, first of all, for the government's perspective, there needs to be a broad review of the legal environment. We would like to see, given the anxiety that exists among the media here, we would like to see the leadership, President Kenyatta, reaffirm his commitment to freedom of expression and freedom of the press and talk about its essential role in the Kenyan democracy. We also have specific concerns, for example, around criminal defamation. Journalists should never be criminally prosecuted for the work that they do. If they defame someone, yes, they need to face there can be legal consequences, but these should be civil matters between individuals. The state has no role, so that needs to be reformed. Media houses and journalists themselves also have a role. Media houses need to better support their correspondents in the field to provide greater protection, greater security, greater training, deepen that relationship. And journalists themselves need to recognize that they have a responsibility to report the news with professionalism and to embrace their role of informing the public fully and completely.
And of course, we've had stakeholders like the government and also the media listening to some of your recommendations. What are some of the feedbacks you're getting in regards to this?
Well, we're going to start our dialogue tomorrow. We have some meetings with the government, and we hope to discuss our findings. We presented the report in advance of the release so that the government would have it and be able to react publicly. We'll see today if they make a statement. We certainly encourage them to do so. We don't expect them to like this. That's normal. Kenya is a democracy. It's part of the international community. This is part of that role, is that you're criticized and you're confronted. But we expect that the government to respond the way that mature democracies respond, which is by directly engaging with its critics, discussing our concerns, addressing our concerns where we can do so, and we come in that spirit. And so we hope that we have some conversations over the next couple of days while we're here, and we're very committed to coming back and deepening that engagement and deepening that discussion should the government be open to those further kinds of communication.
And for CPJ being international, how can you compare the media environment in Kenya as compared to other countries perhaps you've been in?
Well, I mean, one of the things that Kenya, what we're talking about is aspirations. What can Kenya be, and how can it reinforce its role as a regional and, frankly, global leader in terms of the developing world? And one is by committing more deeply to the protection of journalists and freedom of expression. Certainly, Kenya. This is a part of the world in which journalists in some of the neighboring countries face much more significant challenges. Ethiopia, where President Obama will also be visiting, is one of the world's leading jail of journalists. Some journalists have been released from prison there, but there are still at least 11 journalists in jail. Somalia, we all know the situation in Somalia. It's a killing field for the media. So obviously, Kenya is a democratic country. Kenya has a deep tradition of media freedom. It's a question of what kind of example is it setting for the region, for the world, and is it fully serving the Kenyan public?
Thank you very much. Joel Simon joining us here. He is the Executive Director of the Committee to Protecting Journalists. And of course, it just gives us a preview of the report they have launched here. And going by this report, indeed, we do realize that journalism in Kenya has a long way to go, perhaps before the freedom of the press is attained.